happening now, though, just when you're standing with your deep longitudinal system, it keeps you from falling over, right? If it wasn't there,
Yeah.
right? If my hamstring suddenly got cut, I would just fall forward and flop. So it holds us up. It's our anti-gravity muscles, and it's a lot of our posture muscles. So the deep longitudinal system is something we use all the time, and we train, in every back extension that we do. Fairly straightforward, I think. And it's in the sagittal plane, so Pilates addresses it pretty well. Now, that's all well and good, but it's not always even on both sides, right? It's not always that we have the right side and the left side are working in perfect harmony. As some of you noticed, even when you just did your little lean forward and like one side goes, yeah. So there's that level of refinement of the deep longitudinal system. We may play a little bit with that. Let's do some exercises today. But that's fairly straightforward. Then we have our lateral system, also not terribly unstraightforward. Now I'm going to do a couple of things here. The lateral system is our abductors, our adductors, and this is a new addition, our quadratus lumborum. Okay. So what is the relationship between all of those? Let's play a little bit with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put one fingertip, like the thumb, on top of your iliac crest, and the other one on your greater trochanter, so that big pokey outy bone that sticks out the side of your head. And just feel that the distance between your fingers. And then as you shift from side to side, you may notice that the side you shift towards, the fingers get a little wider, and the side you shift away from, the fingers get a little bit closer. Maybe, maybe not. You both your feet on the ground and really shift your hips. So like you're really trying to slosh. Yeah, exactly, exaggerate the slosh. So when that happens, basically when my fingers get longer, I'm getting a little longer through those abductors, right? They're stretching or they're lengthening. And the other side, they're contracting or they get a little bit shorter. Okay. So if somebody, for example, spends their life with their hip in one place, which almost everybody does, whatever hip you like to pop out, y'all know which one it is, because the other one feels really weird. Try to pop it out, right? You pop it, but it's like, oh no, that's just weird. You immediately go back to the first one. So most of us have a posture pattern. Over time, what posture does is, as Eric Franklin says, habit doesn't make perfect, or practice doesn't make perfect, practice makes permanent. Mm-hmm. So, when you spend a whole lot of time hanging out here, this gets long, this gets short, and everything adjusts up and down the chain from there. That's our abductors. The main of those is our adductors, and this is usually a little more of a brain teaser. So this is awkward. Sorry, guys at home. Fingertips on my pubic bone. Other fingertips kind of in the middle of my adductors, so just the middle of my middle thigh. And then as I lean to one side and lean to the other side, you may feel like your fingertips get a little closer together on the side you lean towards. Fingertips a little farther apart on the side you lean away from. So what you discovered there is, let's say we're going to one side, the abductors get longer, the adductors get shorter. And that pulls my hips to the side of the abductor length. Yeah? So every time we're doing anything, and again, whenever we hold ourselves, those will start to develop those habits, and those can misalign our pelvis, which then changes the tension in our back muscles, which then the neck, shoulder, and also hip, knee, ankle, all the way down the chain. This is such a central part that if this is out of whack, everything else up and down the chain gets excited or unexcited or distressed. Okay, so we've got our deep longitudinal system, we've got our lateral system. And a lot of what we do in Pilates is really fantastic for balancing both of these systems. All the adductor work we do on the reformer with our feet in straps, our standing balance work, all those things are great to just try to get the pelvis level. All our work on the pelvis being level, right? All those things are really useful for training that whole body system to understand that. Now we get into our anterior and posterior oblique sling, which, would anybody like to explain this to me? Erika, what is the anterior oblique sling?
Well, I just say we have two big X's on the front and the back of our body, right? So there's like an X marks the spot on the front and there's an X on the back. And there's the front one is anterior, the back one is posterior, right? And we use our anterior one like all the freaking time, right? Walking, running, picking up something off the floor because it's built to do flexion, and rotation, right? So if we get a little nerdy about it, this was my aha moment when Nora was like, starts in a serratus anterior and does beaver poop. And I was like, and she's like, but where does it start? I'm like, in arm. That was my aha moment. Like, it starts in an arm, right? So it starts in an arm, it comes across that external and internal oblique, and it inserts in the opposite adductor. So it ends in a leg. So that's just,
It's so next.
yeah.
The inner unit, right, is it's just all here, which is fine, but the inner unit doesn't do a lot of movement. It just kind of holds it together. This is where movement happens, right? Shoulder connected to rib cage, connected to pelvis, connected to leg. And that's where dynamic pelvic control is not just about that inner unit, that's a small piece of it, but the bigger piece is how do we balance all of these systems that are dynamically moving that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So-
we have the posterior, which is
Lat, opposite
Yep.
glute.
exactly.
Right? And basically that's, if I would think about it, it's kind of like a silly way to do that, but basically that's kind of the idea. That's my back, and then
Extension
that's
and
my
rotation.
extension and rotation.
The
Now,
Nordstrom sling is I teach it. Because have you ever tried clothes on in a Nordstrom? Blaine just heard me teach this last week and I'm like, oh my God. The lighting in Nordstrom's dressing rooms is terrible.
yeah,
And so like, I always teach it as like, you gotta try on that pair of jeans and you gotta use your transverse abdominis to zip up the jeans. But then what do you have to do? Look at your butt in the mirror. You have to extend your shoulders, you did. Nordstrom's in one of my classes and they're gonna be like, I'm like, go look at Bloomingdale's, like,
Yes.
it's much better.
it's still a whole lot more, especially bathing suits.
Yes.
I mean, if they have like, nice rosy glow or that have got like a good fish.
Yeah.
So then anterior oblique slings. And so anytime that I think about movement, okay, this is me because I'm ridiculously nerdy. Sometimes those models are in my head. So I'm looking at a movement, and I'm going, okay, so somebody's standing like this, right? For example, a lot of people stand in kind of, awkward, funky ways. And that's just, where people live, or they're standing like this. And I'm kind of looking and seeing, especially when a client walks in, I'm doing my basic assessment at the beginning, and I'm thinking, okay, so we've got, that's a little long, that's a little short, I've got the hips are swinging over to the side, when they seem to have a torso rotation to the right. I'll just notice that, because we do. And then I'm gonna think, okay, so let's say somebody rotates this way, I want to activate the opposite side of that. So even if I'm gonna have them do, I know somebody, have them do just like an oblique work, I'm gonna have them do more on the side that they don't do as well too. Right, and I'm going to work on just getting mobility into the side they may not have the mobility to. So it's just one of those things where you look at the pattern and then you kind of go use that pattern to create correctives and create things that can help them to get better. All right.
Yeah.
Did that help?
Oh, that's great.
Okay.
And also too, I think just to layer on to Nora and I were talking about this yesterday, because this dynamic lumbopelvic control, and Nora will talk about this for those of you and most of you are with us for the whole journey. When we get to within reach, she'll talk about a similar concept. I'm not gonna spoil anything, but with the scapula, because in Pilates land, they're much like the pelvic floor. When we go through Pilates land, our Pilates initial journey is like lumbopelvic stability, scapular stability. And it's like, it's so drilled into us that when you start to think about, but when I get my femur bone at a level, like my pelvis and my low back is probably going to have to respond a little bit to make that happen. And like, is that okay? Just probably we do that. Like, what's and that's how I see Nora talking about this theory, is that like, what I say to my clients, and we're going to do some wonkadoodle stuff now to throw you off balance, right? So you can feel that in your own body. But like, we're just training my clients, like my dudes, Dan and Tad that came in, feet and straps. Let's just take a common exercise that, they're lifting their legs up and they're doing circumduction, or they're lifting and they're lowering. I oftentimes say, don't pop a wheelie, boys. Like, we're not going to wheelie here, but like, where do you have to accommodate for them? And what's your goal of the exercise? Maybe I wanted to get more mobility with their hips, so I'm not going to be unsafe about it, but I'm going to let that area of their body maybe have some information put into it and move a bit, undulate, if you will. Well, without going to Zumba.
Meaning, yeah, this side of
Yes.
Zumba. So with that, I might just take one brief moment before I start to practice and just walk around the room.
Yeah.
And as you walk around the room, I want you to put your hands around your hips here. So I'm kind of feeling my SAS in the front, kind of swinging around in the back. And I just want you to feel what your hips naturally do when you walk. Now, if you, like myself, were trained as a dancer, you will discover that you may not move your hips at all, ever again in time, because you were trained not to. But I want you to think about what if you don't move them at all? What does that do to the range of motion in your legs? What does that do to the rest of your body? So it's not a lot of motion, but there's that tiny bit of rotation, right? A little bit of an anterior tilt of the pelvis as the leg goes behind, a little bit of a posterior tilt as the leg goes in front. That is a natural reaction. So every single step, the whole system is responding to, ideally. Yeah, can you feel that a little bit? And this is also where I notice, like, does respond a lot, and that's where I think about the rhythm. I think about one guy that used to work with a physical therapist who would run on the treadmill before he started to work every day, and I could tell it was Thomas on the treadmill because it was like thump, 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 thump. Like he came so much harder on that right leg. And sometimes when you're doing this with a client or with yourself, it'll be like da, da, or you feel the full kind of model walk, because you just rotate more in one direction and you've got a little bit of that bias. We see this a lot on the street, watching people walk. And especially think of kind of like, I live in a certain part of Sacramento and there's like a lot of attitude going on when people walk. And you see like the just the funky ways that people put their walk into and put their attitude into their walk. And all of that is going to feed into the entire system and create an imbalance in the system.
Okay, so
EQ.
I have work planned on the reformer as well as eventually on the chair. We will need a small ball for some of this, so please find, I've got two up here, so find that, because this is going to be, as Nora says, your external stimulus, which is going to completely change how your body responds in a particular movement pattern.
Just one thing, putting an unstable surface under somebody will increase muscular activation of all these slings by a lot, by measurable percentages in the 40 to 100% range. So just so you know, as soon as you put more, anything unstable, whether it's a roller or a ball, and those vary a bit, that will increase the activation of the muscles you're trying to get. So it's just something to know.
Okay, so the setup, I love a box now, and I love a side box setup. And I love unilateral, so we're going to combine all of them. We're going to combine an unstable surface. We're going to combine a side box setup with a load coming from the lateral system. So that is what I mean by box at side, small ball at back, very light. And as I mentioned earlier, I want you to make sure that you're being the movement detective on where the position of the box is best be set up for your client or your class. I'm recommending a very light, and we have very light here. You could do this on a blue, for those of you who work on reformers or machines that only have blues. What I do typically is I slack out my rope a little bit on the riser end, and or I might, depending on the machine or the reformer, gear it out a little bit to help with the load. So just think about that. This is also where Nora talked about different types of heights of reformers, where you might need to adjust and have tools in your environments to help you. We're on a traditional height right now with this reformer, so the long box works great. I work on studio reformers all the time. But if you were on the floor, maybe you don't use a box, or maybe you use a moon box, a smaller box. Or no, moon box wouldn't work because you don't have room for the ball. But again, be a movement detective in these situations. And you're probably going to watch me wiggle, and you're going to watch me make micro adjustments because perfect is boring.
And because that's functional. That's what actually happens with balance.
Right.
You're never going to lock and load that. I mean, looking at Kelly, an amazing dancer who did occasionally lock and load those beautiful things, I'm sure. But for the most part, balance should be dynamic.
Yeah.
And you should just don't freak out about those adjustments. Just adjust and know your body's learning from that.
Right. And I think it's that learning piece that is really the neuro piece that really transfers it into your body. So different size balls.
It's in Pilates, man. You gotta say.
something. So what we're working with is about an 8 to 10 inch. You might have a togu ball. Kelly has togu balls here somewhere, probably. And so those are a little bit bigger, but play with what works for you. Just know that anytime you place surface area or, something behind you, that's going to change, obviously, the balance, what you're going to feel, and also the placement might vary. So like with this ball, depending on somebody's spine length, you might need to go up higher. And this can be a bit of a precarious setup. So I would want you or your clients to be pretty close to the edge as if you were setting up for seated footwork on a chair. So you have room behind you. I'm going to probably go upper low back to start and see how that feels for me. To load into this, I'm going to just simply, I'm on a yellow spring. I'm safe because I've got a foot on the floor. The floor, my carriage isn't moving because I'm on top of it. And now I'm good. So I've got options here. I can place a contact point here. I can also safely place a contact point on the rails without doing what? Having fingers in there. So we want to be safe about that. And then I can simply start a leg press out and in. Okay. And so this load is coming from where? My lateral system. Okay. And then if your clients are like, oh, this is so fun, I'm doing so well, this is so nice, then maybe you start to focus on, can they do a little bit more dynamic flexibility on that hamstring? Okay, and you're like, but where's the dynamic lumbopelvic control, Erica? It's coming, right? This is what I call the test the water space.
Well, and this is giving you good feedback about what your low back is doing, because that ball can really tell you, like, where is my low back?
Like, I'm doing pretty well. Would we say yes? So you're like, okay, Erica, like maybe take a hand off now. All right, let's see if we can go with one hand. And I'm noticing, I'm like, okay, pretty good. And then maybe we go two hands, like we're at Lukmano hands now, right? And then maybe we start to play with like adding in a little bit of those slings and the mobility core here, where this hand is kind of, there's a rope in the way. So I oftentimes either keep this hand down if clients need it, or I bring it here and we take a little bit of a supported back extension and you press out. Back extension can also be found in a variety of different ways. And I like to talk about that as well for me, because I'm not a dancer. I mean, I can dance. I do see me on the dance floor with my husband. But I'm not a trained dancer. So back extension was never something that I was like, as a trained dancer, it's like, that's like a big deal from what I understand. So I'm just going to do some of these movements. Now, what sling am I focused on here?
And posterior. Every time you do an oblique, think about the anterior and the posterior, because it'll actually give you more rotation and more support.
Right. So then I'm just changing lever lengths here and playing with that whole anterior and posterior. Okay. And I've got a decent range of motion with my hamstring. But let me pause for a moment and talk about back extension. I really like to find it in a variety of different ways, using a small ball with that support going over a barrel. We have all these lovely tools in our environments to facilitate that. And like I said, I'm not disrespecting Nora or anyone's work in Pilates because it's beautiful. But like the first time I tried to do breaststroke, I was like, I don't think I'm moving. Like, I don't think my back is moving. Right. And then I'm on a reformer. I come from a business and a fitness background. I don't come from a dance background. So the person on the reformer next to me was like, oh my, you're supposed to look like that because we've got issues.
We're getting a little bit of spinal mobility,
Yeah.
but extension is completely variable. I have clients who cannot come past neutral, cannot come off the floor. And I've had clients who can turn around and look at the ceiling. Like, it is that variable. It's just
right. And then what I remember, we're in set it and forget it. So we have all those leg things, but then could we then maybe keep that ball at our back and start to play with using the hands in the loop and what that looks like, right? So I'm going to go short loop here because that just brings me into a bit more tension. And also feel free to use other areas of your loops. I mean, from a safety perspective, you're pretty good if you hook a thumb and a D-ring here too. And you start to do some similar things that you may see on a reformer lying on your back with your head on the foot bar. But now you're off to the side and you're pulling load through your trunk in a different way. Make sense?
And because the pull's coming from that left arm, that sling's going to get a little more activation.
Yeah. Good. Let me make sure that we don't. Oh, we want to stop here because then we're going on to the reformer with the ball. So let's play with that bit and come on, somebody make sure you come up and use this one too, because this is kind of set up. And I actually liked this setup for me. For the arm work, I'm not gonna lie, if I wanted to,